All right, let me check here. We are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Student Hours Live with Professor Sean Clavel here, BIO201 Anatomy and Physiology, Week 7. This is the fall 2024 version here. So we just finished up looking at the integumentary system, looking at tissues. So we're going to look at some as relates to tissues and histology. We're going to look at some each of those microscopic images. When their topics come up. So we'll look at muscle, the skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle in a few weeks from now. But now, one of the more commonly recognized histology features we're going to talk about is bone tissue in this section. So, chapter 6, which is what we'll be talking about this week and going into next week, is bone tissue, or I could even, let's see here, give you another term as it's called osseous tissue. So, bone or osseous tissue is going to be the big topic here for the week. And so chapter 6 kind of rolls into a couple of topics here. So the first one is let's do it this way, the functions of the skeletal system. So the functions of the skeletal system, let me try and and so the functions of the skeletal system might include, we commonly understand that, like support, uh, facilitation of movement, protection, storage of minerals, particularly like calcium phosphate salt, and finally the blood cell production. This is referred to as hematopoiesis. Right? So let me see if I can. So we got the functions of the skin here. So, excuse me, skin. We're talking about the skeletal system. So bone or osseous tissue, the functions, the bone classification. So the second part here is going to be classifications. Bones. So bones are classified by a couple of different ways. First, by location. And so when we talk about location, there's the axial skeleton, which is related to like the skull, all the structures related to the midline, and then the appendicular skeleton. Right. And then we also classify bones on their shape. So the other thing that we classify bone is based on its shape. So the one of the most common is like a long bone. So, like, your arm is made up of a long bone, your femur, which is your thigh bone, which is made up of a long bone. And so, those are one of the most common ones. There are flat bones. So, like, the bones of your skull make up flat bones, and irregular bones. So, the bones of your vertebrae make up irregular bones. So, really, kind of the general classifications there. I'm going to put etc. because there are a couple more that you should be familiar with. But again, there are the classification of bones based on their location. And again, when we talk about that, that's the axial skeleton, the 80 bones that make up the skull, the spine, and even the thoracic cage, and the 126 bone that make up the limbs, and the girdles. So, like your clavicle and scapula are actually part of the appendicular skeleton. We'll get into that, or you'll see that in the lecture there. When we get into the next component here of chapter 6, what we'll be looking at is the structure of bone. So the next part here is the structure of a bone. Primarily, there's two types of structure, two types of, how do I want to say, two classifications of structure. Let me just give you a quick picture here. So what we're talking about here is doesn't have a great picture there, but oh, hey, so let me show you a couple pictures here. So again, our axial skeleton versus appendicular skeleton. Let's see here. This is kind of what we're talking about as it relates to the structure of bone. Not only the different microscopic components there we would see in the bone as a tissue, but also kind of like the components of the long bone. So being able to identify the diaphyses, excuse me, wrong picture there. There it is, being able to identify the diaphyses, so the makeup. So what are the different parts of a bone, whether it's kind of the gross anatomy of the bone, or let's see if I can pop that picture up again, whether it's more of the microscopic anatomy of the bone. Here's another picture here that's related to kind of like the structures of the compact, the osteon component of the bone. So let's just put it this way. Gross anatomy and then there are these bone markings, right? The other component here is bone markings. So these bones have markings on their surface. They're what we might refer to as like surface features. These are often areas where muscles attach to. If it's an opening in a bone, perhaps it's a round or an opening where a nerve might come out of, and so, or an artery might protrude from. So yeah, so we've got these markings on each of the bones. They have some general names that'll help us to give us some context, whether it's like a tuberosity, which is kind of a roughened feature, or a foramen, which is a hole, a narrow hole, a fissure, which is more of a slit. They give us a description of what feature we should be looking for. Then we talk a little bit about the formation of bone, so how bone is formed. Let's say bone formation and growth. Because even after our bones are formed, they continue to grow for a period in up and through adolescence, right? Our bones continue to grow, and then even after our epiphyseal plate or our growth plate closes, our bones grow wider as a result of, potentially exercise or just the stresses that are applied to it. But again, if we don't uh, apply those stresses, whether it's bed rest or going into space where there's not as much gravity, the bone starts to break down as a result. And so bone structure and bone formation and growth is going to be part of that. And then finally, the uh, components of like what things that could go wrong, right? So a big one is going to be fractures, but also remember the association of vitamin D. So thinking about rickets as well. Can also be something that occurs associated with the skeletal system as well. And then calcium homeostasis. So calcium homeostasis is where, again, we go back to the structure of bone here, the functions of bone, where calcium is stored a lot. 99% of our calcium, 99, quite a bit of calcium is stored in our bones. I'm checking right now. Yeah, I'm forget. But yeah, quite a bit of calcium. I was just trying to find the numbers there, but quite a bit of calcium is stored in our bones, and calcium is used for muscle contractions. It's used for neurotransmitters, for nerve information sending its signal as well. So without calcium, a deficiency in calcium, it would be leached from the bones and ultimately could cause some skeletal pathologies or disorders, as we might refer to them. So again, this is going to be the theme of chapter 6. We just finished up the integumentary system. We're into the skeletal system. Again, the big ones here are related to functions of the bone, classifications of the different bones, the structure of bones, different markings. There's going to be some different features that we should be able to identify based on the name, the bone formation and growth, and then, some of those things that could go wrong. And so that's chapter 6, but I also want to bring your attention to the other 2 chapters associated with this section, and those are chapter 7 and chapter 8. So after we talk about the physiology of bone, right, over these next couple of weeks, again, the functions, the locations, the shape, as well as the bone markings, we're going to get into the actual. This will be a chance for me to open up a Canvas page here for everybody. We're going to get into these actual bones themselves, and that's when I'm going to refer you here to the outline that I've been providing for you on each chapter. So if you go into the modules, give you the student view here, chapters 6, 7, and 8. So in chapters 7, chapter 8, each chapter there is going to have the outline, and in the outline, right, if we go into the outline here, what you will see is that you're going to go down a little bit further here, the axial skeleton and bone markings. So you can see here that, again, like the frontal bone, there are the sinus, supraorbital ridge, supraorbital foramen, glabella. There's about 4 features that should be familiar from the frontal bone. The parietal bone, there's 2 of them, the sagittal suture and the coronal suture, so you should be able to identify those features. And that's what you will see in our practicals. Our practicals will be, see if I got any good pictures here. The practical will be identifying the different features of the bone. So again, if we get into, let's say, maybe the scapula here, you can see that, let's go and try this. I love that picture. If we go into the scapula here and the clavicle, what you'll see is that they each have different features. And so what I'm going to do is try and find that list that I just had, or actually find a different, a similar list. Again, so the occipital bone, the temporal bones, the sphenoid bones, they all have these features. And again, you can see that if we go back into modules, view it as a student, go into chapter 8 as well, it has that same list. We'll click over towards the outline here. Oh, I was not patient. Okay, let's try that one more time. Okay, and really, the chapter 8 is just a list of the features of the bone. And the first one there you can see is the scapula. So you can see that there's the right and the left. You should be able to identify the right and the left scapula, coracoid process, the acromion process, the spine, the supraspinous fossa, the infraspinous fossa. So again, if we jump onto the picture that I just had here, you can see there's the subscapular fossa, there's the infraspinous fossa there, located on the posterior surface of the bone. There's the supraspinous fossa. And so being familiar with these different specific features of the bone is going to be important. And so here, let's see if I can even get a full screen. So I say that again. Where do I say that? I say that to encourage you to start looking at that now, taking a list, starting flashcards, whatever it is that is necessary to keep and identify the different parts of the bone, starting with the axial skeleton, moving on into the appendicular skeleton, and again, being familiar with all these different bones. Here's the axial skeleton. You got some features there, and you got the list, but also in our lecture here, you'll start to get familiar with all of these different features. So publish now, not only chapter 6, which is really about the physiology of bone. We've got chapter 7, the axial skeleton, chapter 8, the appendicular skeleton. So the next couple of weeks here